Welcome to the Round 6 Podcast, a weekly roundtable discussion featuring a variety of automotive subjects, interviews, special guests, and stories, hosted by the Round 6 Gearheads. Brian Stupski, Brad King, Alex Welsh, and Eric Hibbs. Joining the Gearheads in episode 21, from Bio Customs and the author of the Air Suspension Design book, Max Fish. Welcome to the Round 6 Podcast. I'm Brian.
I'm Brad.
I'm Alex.
I'm Eric.
And joining us tonight is a guy who, effectively, if you know him kind of as being the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the Two-Link, Mr. Max Fish.
Ouch.
Wow.
Just went like straight to the jugular. I got you.
Oh, come on. That was
Well,
good.
that's all we have tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Come on.
Yeah.
Neil
And
deGrasse
we're
Tyson killed off Pluto as a planet. Max is known for his embracing of, well, yeah, not so much. Okay, let's let that go. Two links will not be spoken of for the rest of the episode.
I mean, we can skim over it real quick if anybody cares, but I'm happy to not. So either way,
I think you're pretty sick of talking about two links, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think there's enough out there right now where if you can't understand, the disdain for the whole two-link conversation, just go look it up. I never want to be that guy, but hey, give that one a quick Google.
Yeah, that's like the Walmart of suspension designs. Nobody's going to go home bragging about where they got it.
I was going to say it's the chlamydia of suspension designs.
But you might brag about where you got chlamydia.
Well, it depends. Unless
That's
you
a
got
good
peed
point.
on by like a koala bear.
No, I mean, just some, in some situations you might brag about where you got chlamydia. I'm not, it's just a thing. Moving on.
Before we go any further, though, I would like to know if one of our listeners out there has contracted chlamydia and you're proud of it, please write to us. I've got to hear the story.
Write to Brian. The rest of us don't want to know.
Yeah, well, no. Write to Brian. Send pictures to Eric. So.
Because we all know I can't read. So that's,
It's going to work out great.
Draw pictures. Stick figures, fine.
I'm going to need a purple-colored pencil. That's if memory serves from that thing in high school. Anyway, how are you tonight, sir? How are you doing, man?
Aside from a few technical issues, having to have the interview at a friend's house and borrowing a mouse because apparently my laptop thing doesn't work, I'm doing pretty glorious. And yourselves?
We are wonderful, man. I'm just happy to have you. I wish our audience could see the massive, and it's a wonderful pile of pillows behind you.
It's borrowed. I can't take full credit for the pile of pillows.
It is. This has really become an episode of like what is it? HDTV.
HD, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's a Max Fish TV, MFTV. Well, that sounds pretty dirty. We're gonna roll with that.
Pimp this house.
Pimp this house. If I could not be associated with Pimp This House, that'd be kind of cool.
Too late. It's done.
Yeah.
Well, again, though, what if it was, what if it's a house you're proud of? You could have, on this week, we're going to create the chlamydia house. Oh, yay.
Well, being, I got a house with multiple rooms and I'm single, so I've got rooms that are all different themed. I could always just pick the next room that I remodel to be the chlamydia room.
I say go for it. And make sure you put a sign out in front of that. This way, if you ever bring someone home and she's like, hey, what's in here? Just wink.
Yeah, that's the no-go room. I might have to
see my pleasure room.
Open it up and it's just chlamydia. That's
Well, you already got a bedazzled pillow, so that'll work just fine in there.
hey, that's not mine. That's borrowed.
Take it with you, man.
It's on loan from the Tim collection.
So let me ask you, I mean, you are, this is, oh my God, we could go so many places on this episode. You really are a Renaissance man in the truest sense of the word. I mean, you do everything, man. You are artistic. You are one of the most well-read people that I know. I enjoy conversing with you. I mean, if this becomes one of our conversations, I apologize ahead to anybody listening in because good luck keeping up.
Yeah, our conversations do go a little off the rails, but it's always nice to, get out of the normal life of how weather and sports are going and talk about, oh God, whatever it is that Brian and I decide to digress our conversations into.
We'll Tarantino the hell out of this. We're going to start from present and we're going to move backward in time.
Okay. All right.
So wherever you feel most comfortable during your conception, cutting the conversation off is where we'll stop this one tonight.
I don't know a lot about the park area where my parents maybe drove the car to conceive, so I'm not going to be able to add a little bit of any information on that one. But
it's okay. I've got the video. We're good.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just keep that to yourself, that'd be super cool.
You'd be surprised at what you can find at the lone remaining Blockbuster.
No.
It was on 8mm.
Probably. So are you asking, like, what am I working on right now?
In a roundabout way, yeah, that would be the short, definitely the short way to ask it. What are you working on now?
How many irons are in the fire, and what kind of things are on those irons?
Yes.
Well, the difficult subject is the golf cart stuff that I developed last year. Kind of went sideways, so I'm still in the process of repairing my life from shifting, from developing a business that was supposed to be kind of self-contained so that I could chase the books, stuff, which we can get into in a little bit, but me writing the books was going to be my quote unquote retirement, where, I can't work with my hands my entire life and still hope to use my hands to ride motorcycles or bicycles or the other things that I enjoy, because then I just go in the house at the end of the day crying that my hands hurt from using them my entire life. So it'd be really nice to teach, use the books as a jumping off point to get into more teaching, one-on-one stuff, consultations, that sort of thing. So I was really hoping to put a business in place that was really profitable. Of course, I've got the shop that keeps itself going, but we're more like starving artist types where it's all boutique work. So it's hard to be profitable, but we're making a comfortable living, enjoying what we do. But it's not the kind of profitable that, a more mainstream type of business would be. So I was hoping to create this business. It didn't work out. So I'm trying to shift gears back, take care of my losses and kind of regain where I was 1 year ago so I can dive back into the book and get her finished up here in the next couple months, hopefully, because I've got a huge amount of people that I had no idea I didn't know how many people were clamoring for the information that the book is providing. So kind of trying to shift all those gears. And in the meantime, also, keeping my art hobby going to hopefully one day get to where I can use it as a supplement to my income and enjoy my life there. And, getting pretty heavily into riding motorcycles, street motorcycles. I grew up in the dirt, so not getting into the street, and try and reach out and connect with a new friend every couple of days, or, with a different friend every day, see how they're doing, just check on everybody, and just kind of never have a moment to take a breather and go, you know what, I'm bored right now. I don't have those days.
You've been writing what is going to amount to be like the book on air suspension design. And
yeah.
You're the dude to write this book.
Thank you.
Oh, definitely. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. You obviously understand the stuff. You have this down. You're one of those guys, you can engineer the hell out of it. You understand the science behind it. And you really concentrate on the part of air suspension that would seem the most logical, but seems completely forgotten. You concentrate on the drivability of a vehicle with air ride.
Yeah.
And for so long, it became kind of like just this thing where it was all about profiling. it was, that whole stance thing. That's all anybody cared about. Can you drop this car down and set it on the frame? You took it that extra level and said, okay, look, the point of a car is to drive it, or truck, whatever you got. Yeah. And you've taken it to the point where you said, hey, look, you guys seem to have forgotten the most important part. It actually has to get down the street. And
comfortably.
And home.
Yeah, and it's frightening because, for years there were so many vehicles out there where you would see guys hanging on with that death grip to the wheel and trying to fight the thing home. So, obviously, there was obviously a need for this book out there, but what got you to the point to decide you were going to sit down and put this knowledge on paper and try to, assist your fellow man, which, again, that's a huge step, too, because, for you, this is a labor of love. Here I am telling you about your book. That's great. Way to interview.
Yeah, tell me more. Carry on. Yeah.
But, okay, so what got you to the point where you finally said, look, this has to be done. This has to be written.
It kind of came about really slowly. I had no intention of actually doing a book. I wrote for most of the major truck publications, primarily at Mini Truckin', but even before Mini Truckin', I think what was their Street Source for the Mini Truck guys. Street Source had given me my own little Ask Max section where I was able to, just one-on-one interact with people, answer their questions, in just a direct, not opinionated way, but just here's the math that's associated with this. And then when I started writing for Mini Truckin', and they brought me on doing tech. They said, okay, 1 week where you get to write, or 1 month you get to write tech, 1 month you get to write editorial. And then Mike Alexander was the editor at the time. You guys did the thing with him 2 weeks ago. Did a podcast with him, and he brought me on, and he got so much positive stuff about my editorial that he's had me stop writing tech and just continue writing editorial, which was a lot of fun, but there were still tech questions coming in. And I think Sport Truck, and of course I had, friends in all the different truck mags, so they all asked me to write tech for them. But the thing is the stuff gets lost. The magazine gets thrown on the shelf and ends up on the back of a toilet or something like that, and it's so easy to get lost. Sure, it might be there, but it's hard to find. So I started writing a little bit of tech through my Facebook page. You got a bunch of people that were following me through there. And one day a tattoo artist I follow was a friend of the family's, and she was selling copies of her sketchbook. And I thought that'd kind of go pretty cool. What if I sold just a quick little sketchbook type of thing, as I put air quotes over sketchbook, of my basic suspension design concepts that people could just use as a kind of a go-to rule book, and immediately had a ton of people interested. And so I did the little bit of homework or what it was going to cost to take this stuff up to like Kinko's or, Staples or something like that, and have them just print it off and staple it. And by the time, by the end of the month, I realized there's 500 people that wanted one of these little stapled together sketchbooks. And, so I was like, well, damn, okay, I better look for somebody who does it in a higher quantity. And then by the time I found a better higher quantity thing, now there's a couple thousand people that are interested, at which point now I'm turning this little quick note thing into a bigger book, and then it started getting so prolific that I'm getting people from across the world, from different countries, that are interested in the book. No longer is this for the people that are following my work and are, fans, for lack of a better description. This is now people that are just clamoring for information because it doesn't exist anywhere. Nobody makes a book for how to design stock suspension geometry. Every book out there is about racing suspension geometry. Who's modifying their stock suspension to be more stock? So, so it's kind of something that I started to realize, like, holy crap, this is a real thing. People really want this. It doesn't exist in this sense of how do I make a vehicle just drive normal again. So it just kind of turned into a thing, and now I'm pulling my hair out and I'm overwhelmed because I could have apologized to my small fan base. And now I'm trying to apologize to, it's almost to 200,000 people on that account now. I'm like, oh, I don't even know how to apologize that the book's taking as long as it is to 200,000 people. I just can't send out an apology that big. So, it's absolutely 100% of my brain. I need to get it done. It's, top of my list, but doing life things, it's just kind of taking the back seat at the moment to me trying to get back to being able to pay my bills on a monthly basis and feed my animals and whatnot. So, that's what kind of led me to this point. And it's, the time that it's taken to get to the stage and asking the questions and posting things online has helped me really shape the book to be that go-to piece of information rather than just if I just piped up and said, oh yeah, you guys should run your shock at a 2-to-1 motion ratio. Well, that's kind of a general rule of thumb. Now I have to address it. I can't just put out a basic rule of thumb and say like, you guys will figure it out. No, now I have to actually start from the beginning and teach what motion ratio means and explain why a different shock would need more or less. It's become this huge thing that I never expected it to be, but I'm totally ready. Like I can do it. I just wasn't expecting that,
Right. Well, and your writing style is neat because you're teaching geometry to most of us who don't necessarily understand geometry.
Yeah.
But when you explain it, it makes sense. I mean, that alone should be a huge plug for the book, is that it's these complicated concepts are explained in a manner where, we can look at it and go, oh shit, I can do that.
Yeah. That's
now,
what I'm
how
hoping.
well I do it is, in question, but
yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because that's exactly what I'm shooting for. I don't want it to be clinical because a clinical book's not fun. I really enjoyed the Carol Smith series, the Tune to Win and Tune to Engineer series, and I think there's 4 books or 5 books in that series, and I enjoyed the way that he wrote it because it was almost like we were just having a consultation. He's sitting there telling us about it, rather than it being super clinical and dry, and it takes the fun out of it. So I'm trying to make it to where it's nice to actually want to learn, rather than mind-numbing because you don't understand what's even being said.
Well, I would almost like to see this become something bigger unto it. So, and here I'm giving you, hey, since you don't have enough on your plate, why don't you turn this into like...
While you're at it.
I really think the way you teach things, because I always learn something from you, and I know you and I have said that we've had a lot of really good technical talks on goofy stuff. It's just funny for me, coming from kind of an engineering background, where to talk to someone like you, if I would have had a professor like you in school, I think I would have done much better in life. You have a total understanding. You have a love for the core concept. And that's something that really lacks. Like a lot of people, I'm passionate about this. Well, what are you passionate about? I'm passionate about the fact that I can get up in the morning and I get a paycheck for it. You come at it from that whole different aspect where it's like you're passionate about it because you want people to understand it. I think that's how you and I kind of connected at the beginning, where it's like we get into people who, if you really get something that's exciting, because when somebody gets it, you're jazzed about it. You can talk about it for days. And again, I just think that what you're doing is a really great service for people. And the fact that you're explaining something that really is kind of a dark science for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, in the world, there's guys who can tune the hell out of a carburetor. That's a whole black science unto itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it really is.
And a lot of guys miss it, and even at the highest end. You got guys that are building, $1 million+ cars. There's problems with these cars. You watch these things tool around, and you watch them, there's bump steer issues and goofy stuff where you can look at the suspension when you see one of these cars going together. And I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm just saying there are things that kind of get overlooked where it becomes like form over function for a lot of things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
I've been told. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to. I was going to segue that into something else, but I want to hear your thoughts first. I'm sorry, man.
Oh, I was just going to say I get called in occasionally to do a little bit of consulting with higher end shops where they get kind of built into a corner. Steering is one of the weirdest concepts. I've never been able to explain the full steering concept from all 3 dimensions to anybody and have them go, oh, well, damn, I get it now. There's so many complexities that go into it with Ackerman and bump steer and as we go into all of the different things. But I've been called in and they go, this thing drives really funny on the street. The alignment guy can't do anything with it. Can you fix it? And, we'll go, okay, we need to move this here and we'll move this here. Let's get this repaired. And, cause they can build this beautiful car, but when it comes down to like a couple of the, what I consider fundamental things, it's missed. But that's kind of the problem is they're not, while I consider it fundamental, it's not fundamental in the rest of the industry because again, there's nobody out there teaching the baseline stuff to begin with. They're just teaching racing stuff, and it doesn't always translate.
Exactly. So it's kind of a weird thought, and I don't want to stay too long in the whole mini truck side, but it's where a lot of this stuff stems from. When, gosh, like as far as like gilding something, that became kind of the norm for a while, especially like late 90s, early 2000s, where the busier something was, the cooler it was.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have
the Goldberg devices.
Exactly, like bizarre looking arms that I remember looking at, and you saw a lot of it in the off-road world, especially, where it was like the more complex, apparently the cooler it was.
Yeah,
so in design and engineering are always one of those things where the simpler it is, the more beautiful it is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and I always see that with a lot of, especially your designs when you get into things like your spindles. Man, God, dude, seeing your stuff get built like that, I always just kind of sit there and go, oh, Max is dreamy.
The off-road guy that I kind of got a lot of my inspiration from was a guy named Dave Clark, who apprenticed under Nye Frank. If you guys know who Nye Frank is.
Yep.
Right. So I had the pleasure of getting to know Dave Clark pretty well. And, Nye had some really avant-garde ideas, which are cool. I mean, avant-garde is what pushes the envelope, because if everybody just sticks with whatever the status quo is, then of course no one's pushing the envelope. But Dave's build style was a little odd for the off-road world. Like you were saying, a lot of it was super crazy, and Dave's just straightforward. I like this. I don't like a ton of travel. I want it to handle good. And so I took a lot of inspiration from him. And he came over and looked at one of my off-road trucks I built early on, a small truck, but he goes, I see a lot of my style, a lot of inspiration in that. I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, but there's only a couple ways to skin a cat, It was nicely done. And so it was just, this is one of the guys I look up to, one of my, what I would consider a mentor in that sense, coming over and giving me the high five for copying him. But the reality is it works. Simple works if you know what you're doing. If you want to go crazy, go crazy. I'll support you. I'll help you go crazy, but let's make sure the fundamentals are set up right. Going crazy just so it can look crazy and not making sure that the wheel doesn't fall off in the meantime is silly.
Right. Getting to this point where obviously you have the knowledge and the experience to play with this kind of stuff. So growing up, how do you make the jump from? Well, heck, what were you like as a kid? Let's get into that, man. Let's dive way deep. Let's learn about Max as a kid.
I remember my mom had a harness. Because I was born in the 70s. So my mom actually had a harness for me because I was a bit of a yard sale of a kid. So she said she only used it a couple times. I called her out on it the other day, and she laughed, and she says, oh, yeah, I only used that a couple times, but you were a bit of a handful. I was the one that was into everything. But it was like I came by it honest. My dad's hobby list is enormous, and I just thought it was normal. How would I know any different? Your reality is normal, right? So I thought it was normal to build your own house, to, my dad would never buy a TV. He'd buy a Zenith Heathkit. I don't know if you guys remember the Heathkit stuff.
Oh, sure.
Wow.
Yeah. My dad would never buy anything normal. It was always a Heathkit. He'd come home, and he was a computer repair tech after he was a he was a mechanic first, if I remember correctly, and then he got into construction, and then he went to Computer Data Institute, I believe it was, during the computer boom where everybody was like using computers and getting away from cash registers. And so he was a computer repair tech, and we got into photography and business and telecommunications. I don't know anybody that's got the amount of degrees this guy has, but he still doesn't know what he wants to be when he grows up.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
That
that was just my normal. So I bought a dirt bike in a box to where the transmission was blown apart, and it was just all separate gears on a couple of cross shafts, all just in a box. And I bought a manual, and my dad goes, "Here you go." I think it was 12 or 13, and he shows me, here's the basics of the manual. Go for it. Call me if you got any issues. It was never like, "Here, let me do this for you." So I was groomed to do this from moment one. I had, I think, 2 Volkswagen Bugs by the time I was 14, and I grew up in a really, really small town with less than 4,000 people in it. So I could drive my cars to my friend's house at 14. Just that was my reality. I maintained all my friends' bicycles. I, relaced wheels at like 12 years old or something on all my bicycles, and raced BMX and just anything, models. I designed my own bicycle line back in the day in high school. It was just all of the things that I kind of did as a kid, all just inadvertently groomed me to be doing exactly what I'm doing today. I don't see how I could have shifted what I'm doing at all, because none of it led me to anywhere else.
That's amazing.
So you got to wonder if there's an alternate dimension it's like, your big time of the year is right around tax time, accountant Max.
Yeah. I think the less bohemian Max would probably be a psychiatrist, because I really enjoy human psychology, but I enjoy human psychology for people who are interested in bettering themselves, not people who just want to pay me so they can bitch at me and tell me about how bad their life is, So I'm not sure that it would go over well, but maybe in a different life.
Let me ask you, so now, okay, you get into high school, you're already designing a bike line and things like that. So when you were in high school, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do? Or
Nothing.
were you just kind of open? You were like, well, I'm going to try out, either, community college or university or a trade school, something? Or did you just kind of, let's say, post-graduation from high school, what's Max's first step?
Get out of Anza.
Escape from Anza.
Not a lot of things available to grow with when you're in a town of less than 4,000 people. So my parents went through a divorce, and my dad and I, we moved down to Hemet. My dad at the time, he owned a cabinet shop, and I worked with him. And I told my dad I want to be a mechanic, and my dad goes, "You don't want to be a mechanic." And my mom wanted me to be the lawyer or the doctor, because I was the book smart kid. All of my siblings were all smart kids, but I was like the one. I was supposed to be some sort of millionaire of some sort, chasing a thing, but it was never in my deal. I've always been way too bohemian for that idea. So, I just kind of wandered around. I didn't have a lot of drive. Not a lot of things excited me. Cars did, of course, but it was just whatever. So I worked for my dad pretty low key. And they closed the business down. I think my next job started at Target as a stalker. A guy in the back who stocks shelves, not somebody who stares at hot women down aisleways or anything like that. They didn't have a position for that. Otherwise, I would have definitely.
You were missing out. Oh, okay. Oh, so you were aspiring. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they showed me the security areas where I could have been a professional stalker, but they didn't have like any openings yet. So I just, car things were just a hobby. It wasn't even on my radar. There was a guy so locally here in Hemet is Larry Miner had a racing team. I believe he was the Cruz Pedregon McDonald's car back in the early mid-90s.
Larry Miner was around for a long time. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Larry Miner is in Hemet was a major, fundamental guy. Well, the whole Miner family, and then even up in Anza, there's a lot of Miner interaction, with fields and all kinds of crazy stuff. So he's always been this like little background thing in my life. And then Miner was friends with, I want to say Nelson Lingo. That may not sound right, but there was a gentleman here in town who also had a sand drag team, and they had a top fuel engine out of one of Miner's cars, and he ran sand drags. A lot of people don't know sand drag racing was started here in San Jacinto in the riverbed. I believe Larry Miner was one of the first guys to start that kind of thing up, and it became a lot more prolific, of course. But so the gentleman offered me, he had a construction company, offered me a job on his construction company and said I could be on his race team and blah, blah, blah. And it just felt wrong. I don't know why. It just felt wrong. So I said no. I just kept working at Target, and which seems really, really weird in hindsight, but just something in my body said, this doesn't feel right. Don't do it. So, and I'm glad I didn't, because I never would have started my shop. I probably would have got sucked into some weird thing where I just was chasing around drugs or something. I don't know what would have happened being on some weird race team, and a construction worker during the day. Not anything bad about construction workers, but it's just like there's this weird thing where you just end up working your entire life being a construction worker during the week and then chasing around a race team on the weekends. And it just felt wrong to me. So I said no. And then I got a shop with a couple friends so that we could work on our Volkswagens. And then a couple years go by, the friends leave and then leave me hanging with the shop by myself. And then a buddy of mine that I'd known for a while, he goes, I'm looking for a shop too. So we became just shop partners. And then it turned into a business. We just started doing a little here, a little there. And eventually just went, hey, let's start our business. So we both quit our jobs where we're making a lot of money for a young 20-year-old kid. I was almost $4,000 a month, and he was just under that. And we quit to make about $700 a month doing our own thing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. So, I quit I got a job at a stereo shop, and it's the only thing I'm actually certified in is mobile electronics. So And I try to keep that a secret, so if you could bleep over that, so people don't come to me and ask me about wiring issues on their car.
I had a million questions for you about an Orion amp that I was going to hook up.
An old red HCCA 2100?
Of course.
Those are the best. I've still got some paper cone 10 sitting in the garage waiting to go in a Mazda or a Datsun or something one day.
Nice. That's so rad. But yeah, and then the shop just took off for there. A couple of years later, my business partner got a divorce, and so he decided to change careers and left me to run the business on my own, and that's kind of where that all went. So I'm not sure how far we segued from the original question, but it feels like we're way off base now. So
no, that sounds about right. That's awesome, and I can't thank you enough for sharing that, man. I wanted to dig into what makes Max Fish. That'd be weird. It'd be weird if I asked him what makes Max Fish. Shirley Temple. That'd be the weirdest question ever. He'd be like, well. A bottle of booze and
The booze is later on in life. I became an alcoholic on purpose about 4 years ago.
No, we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
How weird it all comes full circle. So let's go back. You obviously talked about having some VWs and things like that. What was your first car?
I believe it was a 64 VW Bug. It was mostly Bugs in the beginning. I really cut my teeth on cars and Volkswagens. It was a 64 Bug that I did, like I said, I think it was 14. I did some work for a friend's mom. They were doing some construction work, and they just needed extra help. And they said, hey, if you come help us for a week, I'll give you this car. Done.
Awesome.
So, yeah. And, I lived down about a mile-long dirt road. So it was lowered. Like the idiot that I am, I lowered it down, driving. I mean, if you guys went down there, you would shake your head and go, why would you lower a car? Because it pretty much wouldn't get out of our driveway. In certain areas, I had to have certain spots where I drove up because it was way down a dirt road, and not just a nice dirt road like Anza. Like I said, not many people live there, so rains would trash the road, and here I am driving around with this Bug that's only a couple inches off the ground like an idiot. But
Didn't we all do that though?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Well, Brad and Alex always have liked their shit on the ground, and so have I.
Oh, my stuff's always on the ground.
But you live down a mile-long dirt road? That's the part I just can't get through my brain. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I had dirt bikes and BMX bikes to make up for the time when I couldn't get out with the car, I guess.
Well, that seems to be that's a recurring theme with anyone you talk to in this whole industry or hobby or however you want to look at this thing. Everybody starts with BMX bikes or skateboards, take your pick. And the next logical move is you either do a VW or some form of a mini truck. Those are like the gateways in.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's always that same path. And no matter what somebody's into, you can track it right back to that point. And it's so weird.
Yeah, it's funny that they're both the affordable entry level car, I guess, for some weird reason. But today only Volkswagens are worth a ton of money and trucks aren't.
Getting into that, like you've built some cars over the years that, man, really kind of border on that line of paying the utmost respect to that kind of a theme where, you know, it's traditionally styled, but it still breaks the mold and it becomes memorable on its own. You know, I mean, case in point, I don't know if you want to talk about, you know, like Jerry's Merc like that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of car that really embodies everything that was done right back in the day, but has this totally different timeless spin to it. I mean, you can look at that car, and I don't go back, and I don't think you can really look at Jerry's Merc and say, oh, that car there, that's a 2012 build. You're never going to do that.
Yeah. I kind of on purposely try and build to make cars a little more timeless. I mean, the 20-inch wheels would be probably the wheels and maybe the interior would be the only thing that would date it. Not horribly. It wouldn't be like, you know, pinpointing something that's got painted yellow bumpers and sweet interior or something. But, it's going to be in a general realm, obviously. But in 50 years, if he decides, you know what, I want to kind of update this, he'd just have to change the interior and change the wheels a little bit. The rest of the car is still going to be cool in 50 years because I didn't put a bunch of billet, whatever everything is, or any of what's the new 3D printing style where it looks like an organic thing.
Oh, God. Yeah, or you could do that with everything, and suddenly everything is made of, instead of going with, oh, it's got great front fenders on it. Oh, no, those aren't even factory steel. We hand-built those and then molded them and made them out of Kevlar,
Yeah.
I guess there's a time and a place for that. I don't know. We kind of got into this and just really got my brain going. I thought, there's a certain style, and it's a Max style. It's unique. You can look at something you've done. You're welcome. I love that about your stuff, because some people go an entire career and never find that niche. You never find the thing that just makes it yours. So where does your inspiration come from? What, man, I know it's tough to ask an artist this, because sometimes you don't even know. I mean, it just happens organically. But like, did anything in particular, is there a conscious point when you started to develop, for lack of a better word, your own aesthetic? And I know that word gets overused these days, but I'm trying.
What else? Yeah, what are we going to replace that word with? Yeah. If you'd asked me that question a couple years ago, I probably would not have any idea how to answer it. But the reality is the one thing in my brain that just doesn't function is I can't process chaos. I can't come up with a pile of ideas and pour them into one mold and go, there it is. That's awesome. My superhero strength is the ability to, like BASF back in the 90s, where they said, we don't make the car, we make the car better. That's more of my approach is I like the idea of, let's take the lines on that car and refine them. Let's clean them up. Let's make them really clean. Let's sharp. Let's do a solid color paint job with some really heavy effect in the paint, or, machine our own wheels like we did on the Merc, and just make this to where it's inspired by, very much heavily inspired by what it's supposed to be, but let's just slightly modernize it because we have the ability to do that, but only to an extent because I don't like using computers and stuff to do everything. So I can only modernize it to the stage that I have. I don't have scenes and 3D printers and stuff. So it's it kind of forces me into this little narrow window of that is how modern my cars are and my designs, my motorcycles and all that stuff. They're all just kind of limited to this thing where I can refine the lines, but I can't create a new thing on its own because my brain just simply doesn't work that way. So it just kind of created itself, really, and I like it. So I'm glad that it is what it is. So it could be worse. I'm pretty honest with myself. If I put something together, I go, well, that's just shitty.
Yeah, that's an easy rut to fall into. And obviously having to work on a car, that had a real traditional kind of a bent to it. Do you have a favorite? This is another tough question to ask a car guy. Do you have any favorite traditional style customs, like ones from the golden era?
Cadzilla.
Right on.
Yeah, Cadzilla is like my go-to pinnacle. The only thing I look at Cadzilla and go, what the hell is that moon ice tank in the front grille for?
Yeah.
Other than that, the rest of the car is gorgeous.
It was free.
It was free?
That was a Billy touch.
Probably. I don't know.
One day I would love to ask that question. I'd say, of all the things on that car, that is the one thing. I remember as a kid seeing that issue of Hot Rod Magazine and going, oh, this car is awesome. Why?
Yeah. What is that?
Every car that Gibbons has, though, he has that one little touch on it, and I think that's his addition to that car.
Sure.
Yeah, he's always got some quirky thing on there, like a helicopter spotlight or something weird.
Okay.
And I think that was the thing on that one.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't ruin the car for me because it's still absolutely my pinnacle.
That tells you how good the car is. You could throw a moon tank in the front of a custom and it still looks great.
In the grill.
That's saying something.
If that car was ever duplicated, you'd have to put that in. It's iconic at this point. It's not right, but it's iconic.
Oh, but it is right on that car. That car without it, if you saw that car minus the moon tank, you'd be like, well, but,
It needs something, yeah.
Exactly, and I think it's a hell of a car to choose, though. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, thank you. But that's, obviously the Merc pretty heavily follows that same style, but with a Mercury instead of a Cadillac, so didn't see net as a baseline, I didn't do that on purpose. It's just when it was done or got close to done, Jerry had pointed it out to me, and I was like, oh, okay. I can't be mad about it. Subconsciously, we're all inspired by the things we see, so...
Well, I remember seeing the first pictures. I don't know if it was you or Jerry that showed them to me when you just had the roof kind of mocked up. And I remember in my head going, man, it's almost Cadzilla-esque, but it works so perfect on that Merc because it didn't just take like a sedanette type, fastback roof and try to meld it to that car. You just kind of went off and kept that a swoopy, for lack of a better word, two-door sedan style, but yet hard-topped roof. That's a lot to say. Use your words, Brian. You did a really cool modern interpretation of like that hard-top style, like that Barris style roof, and it was really cool.
Thank you.
I love the fact, though, man. Again, here I'm harping on you. This is gonna be hard to listen to, but you did the one thing that made me so happy. It has such a cool, graceful arc. If you follow your eye from the A pillar up and back to where it dips back into the quarter panel, it has this beautiful arc to it. You didn't end up with that weird flat spot that so many guys fall victim to, where it's like your eyes going along. It's like this nice, graceful curve. All of a sudden, it flattens out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and then it's back to, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, I know you know this, Brian, but a lot of other people don't know. We made the roof. We didn't chop the existing roof.
Right.
So we weren't stuck with trying to use any pre-existing sheet metal or anything. So, it's one of the questions we get asked is how far did you chop it? I have no idea. we didn't shop it. We just built the roof to look the way that we wanted it to. And it was the same with all the mods that are on the car. It had nothing to do with what pre-existing measurements were there. It was what's going to look right down the side of the car. And a tape measure doesn't matter. A couple years ago, or years before that one, before I was building the Merc, I don't know if you ever saw pictures of the 66 Chevelle Pro Touring car we did. Full tube car. Really neat. Just a bummer. Never got to see any press, but regardless, the client loved it. It was a lot of fun. But what we ended up doing is the client bought it he bought it with 1,500 miles, I think, on it. Because it was the dealership owner's son that drove the car for a year, and then he bought it the next year when he was in first year of college or something. Managed to hang on to it his whole life, had us build it. So as an ode to the old car, when we built the new car, we put the Chevrolet logo that's embossed in the top of the valve cover. We put that in the quarter panel in the back where it would normally say Chevelle. And so we set the car flat on the ground, and I made it to where the Chevy logo was parallel to the ground, and it was so wrong. And it looked like it pointed down. So it was that moment I realized it doesn't matter what the tape measure says. It matters what looks right. So at that point I just started, when we do suspensions, the tape measure matters. When we're making sure door openings are the right length and that sort of thing, yes, tape measure matters. When it comes to determining what lines look right and stuff like that, the tape measure only matters to copy it onto the other side.
That's brilliant.
That's golden advice. See, and that's a hard thing to teach someone, where you go, you've got to be able to trust your eye.
Yeah.
Because your eye never lies to you. Well, let's just say the eye doesn't lie, the mind can lie. That's an easy thing to have happen, because you can fool yourself into liking anything. But yeah, when you just know something's right, you know it's right. It feels that way. Speaking of like traditional style stuff and timeless things, you had a quite a cool friendship with one of the masters in our hobby, Larry Watson.
Well, I knew Dick Dean, who was one of George Barris's the guys that worked with Barris and built a lot of customs. So my dad's cabinet shop was originally literally next door to Dick Dean's shop when I was a kid. I had no idea. He was just the dude that was making the Flintstones mobile for the movie. And I just thought, man, that guy does some weird stuff. And somebody mentioned him being, a custom car builder or whatever. But like I said, as a young kid, I had no idea what I wanted to do anyway. So, didn't really mean much. And then, when I got into doing more customs, my shop was literally right around the corner. I would say maybe a half a mile from Dean's shop. And, so I went over there occasionally. And one time I caught him on a bad day and he chased me out of the shop, and I just come by to say hi, and he chased me out, and I'm like, okay, fine. Went back to my shop, and a couple of days later he comes in and he tosses his hat in my lap, and I look up at him like, I'm not sure if we're going to be friends yet. You've already chased me out of your shop, and he goes, I'm so sorry for chasing you out of the shop. Somebody told me that you were, one of the local shop guys. I just thought you were some random kid. You came in, I didn't recognize you. I'm so sorry. And I go, that's cool. I get it. You had a bad day. No problem. So we became kind of buddy. And now every time I went by the shop, he wanted to drop everything he was doing and tell me all these crazy stories about, because he was involved with the world's longest limo build and oh my God, Dick Dean was so prolific in the custom car world over all those years, and very avant-garde, a lot of neat ideas, the Shelaco and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then Larry Watson actually moved in locally for whatever reason. He moved into town, and I was doing a lot more paint work at the time, and was doing some of the panel work that he became kind of famous for in the mid 60s and stuff, with like his Purple Bird and whatnot. And so he just come by because he knew the manager of the complex we were at as an old timer. And there was a handful of Bellflower boys that actually lived in Hemet as well. So it was just kind of, we ran into each other more and more and more. And I was that place he could always go. And I think he just came by because he could relive his childhood and give us inspiration. And he'd bring by his binders with all of his photos of stuff that he built. painted over the years and tell me stories. And when the shop would just come to a halt when he came by, because that stuff's priceless. It doesn't matter how busy we are. Learning from one of the actual, how do you describe how important Larry Watson is to 60s customs? Even lowrider. I think a lot of lowrider. He probably inspired lowrider paint jobs more than he did 60s customs, in my opinion, with the panel work and that sort of thing. That particular style, anyways. So he would just go on, tell us stories, tell us tricks, tell us all kinds of stuff that's not safe for the internet. And it just got to where he became a friend. And so my ex-wife is one of those people that reaches out on everybody's birthday. Everybody's got to get a phone call, got to have a cake or whatever. So every year we'd contact him, tell him happy birthday, and go up to his house, visit him. And anytime he was in town, we'd always connect, because he ended up moving to the high desert. I think that's where he was when he passed away. But ended up
Victorville.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then Roger Odell was a client of mine, still a friend. And Roger was really close with Larry. So staying in touch with Roger and, knowing what was going on and all that stuff. It's all just these people that are kind of staples in the 60s custom world were just my friends, because we all were in town, and, Hemet was Motorhead City for a long time. And I tried to do the best work that I could. And all these guys were I was respectful to them because of who they were. And they in turn, appreciated me not being some punk kid. So it was really, really special. I actually forget about how neat it is that I was able to interact with these guys, the real Bellflower boys. So I can look at 60s cars today and shake my head and go, nope, the Bellflower guys would call you bubblegummers.
It's funny, Brad and I knew Larry also, and after he moved up to the desert, we knew him from up here, and he was a really neat guy to talk to. He had a memory that was amazing.
Right?
He could tell you his mix ratio that he did on a car back in the 60s. He was that sharp, and what a neat guy to talk to. And
absolutely.
And it was like he was very good about taking pictures. If you ever went to the little museum he had at his place, it was phenomenal because he had pictures that you would never, ever see anywhere. I mean, I know that there's some guys out there that have been kind of keeping the collection alive by showing some pictures every once in a while, but it deserves to be in a book. That book would be 500 pages, and I'm not exaggerating. It was stuff he's got is just phenomenal. And what I liked about him, he always picked the right color. You looked at some of the cars that he did, and it's just like, who would ever put that color on a car? And you look at it, and it's perfect. I couldn't picture a better color on the car.
Yeah.
And he was a neat guy, man. And we used to see him a lot at cruise nights, and we saw him, towards the end, and it was really sad to see somebody that had that kind of a mind, and you know that you're not going to see him for much longer.
Yeah.
That was hard.
It was. Well, we had built towards the end when he had moved up there. We had a 61 4-door Cadillac that we wanted to paint in as a an ode to Watson. So we went up there and I had a paint sponsor at the time, and I think it was SEM. No, it wasn't SEM. I don't remember who the sponsor was at the time, but we're with House of Color now, who loves us up appropriately. If I could do a shameless plug there. But because I didn't have the big book that House of Color did. This other paint supplier had a much smaller custom paint thing. So I went up there and went, okay, Larry, these are all the colors we have. This is it. What would you do if I brought you this car in 1965? How would you paint this car? And so he helped us pick out colors and lay out the basic job that, the tape lines and stuff, how we do it. And he took us around his little museum and did the thing. And it was actually covered quickly by Courtney Hollowell went with us. Because I don't think Courtney had met Larry, or if we did, it was only in passing. So I took Courtney with us to meet him, and I think it ended up in Street Trucks magazine, or no, what was the Hot Rod magazine that was an offshoot of Street Trucks? World of Rods.
Yep.
Yeah, it was in World of Rods.
I could see the cover, but I couldn't come up with the name.
Yeah, it was in World of Rods, our little trip up there. So yeah, we did that, got it all painted up, and didn't get the interior or the whole car done or anything, but we got the whole car finished. And took it up to a little barbecue that was like, yay, Larry, I hope you live for a long time. And he got to see the car, and that was the last time I ever saw him, because I think he passed away like only a month later. But I was just so elated that he was able to see the car before he passed away. And he had nothing but accolades to give me. He goes, "Holy shit, who blocked this car?" I did. And he goes, "Man, you got a lot of hours in this thing." Yes, I do. Thank you for noticing.
Man, you don't need a trophy when that happens.
No, God, no. That happened when we took the Merc to SEMA as well. Monday, I'm detailing the car out, and let me tell you how much I don't like detailing cars. So I'm there in the booth detailing away. I had already told Jerry, just stay off the internet, because there's no way you're going to avoid seeing the car. He wanted to see it all together in person. So sitting there detailing, guy walks up and starts asking me questions about the car, and I look up at him, and it's John Kosmowski. And so he's asking about how we developed the color, because I told him that we custom made the color. And he was asking how we did it, and he said, whose paint is it? And I said, "Oh, it's your guys's." He goes, "Oh, no kidding. How did you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe you guys can answer, because we got this really weird flop out of it that doesn't make any sense." And he goes, "Man, you'd have to ask the chemist, because this doesn't make any sense to me." And he goes, "Wow, man," he said, he probably sat there and talked to me about for 15 minutes. And then he finally goes, "This is probably one of the most beautiful Mercs I've ever seen. Good job, man." I was like, "Wow, can we just put the car back on the trailer and go home now, so I don't have to put up with the rest of this week of SEMA?" Like, that was it. I was done. I didn't need any more. And thankfully, when Jerry came out, I think on Wednesday, and John and our local rep Mike, they came by to just congratulate us on the car again, leave a little tag on the bottom, for the SEMA's people, so they know it's there and everything. And they got to meet Jerry, and he was telling Jerry that same thing, and Jerry just goes, "Oh, I'm done too. Let's just go home." That's it. I'll take it. I don't care if it gets in a magazine or anything. Those are from Watson and from Kosmowski to have those kinds of accolades. I'm done. It's good.
So I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Where did you learn to paint?
Which you're talking about automotive paint, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh, yeah, because with your Renaissance man status, this could go anywhere. But let's stick with, let's go with automotive paint, because I do want to touch on your art too. We haven't even gotten there yet.
Sure. Right. I just started. I painted my Bug. I had when I had the shop with my friends originally, I painted my Bug. I went up and bought a cheap paint gun and asked a couple questions. Here's how you do it. And I just started painting more and more and more. And I'm not afraid to ask questions and have somebody tell me if I'm doing it wrong or whatever. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The chemistry is a little weird at times, but, understanding math makes the chemistry a little easier on how to mix and, how to make it flow, and just kind of did what it did. And then, doing, any of my panel work and stuff was all pretty simple math. I wasn't, again, not super avant-garde in that sense myself as a painter, as an automotive painter. I like the basic stuff where the lines follow the existing lines of the car, and I'm not a blow dot guy or, any of that kind of drips and that sort of thing isn't my style. I'm not against it. It's just not my style.
I'm going to take that out of the show notes then, because I just listed you as Freak Drop Max. So,
yeah. So it was just literally just time, just painting cars for friends and stuff. Just got better and better at it. And it literally just kind of, in the shop, doing it professionally, it got to a point where in the shop, you said we get to cuss only a few times. I literally got sick of paying people to fuck stuff up for me. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to learn how to do as much of this stuff as I can, because I'm sick of it. And clients coming in saying the same thing. All we ever did was just backed vehicles really in the beginning, and a couple little bit of, weld door handles up, shave door handles or something. But then somebody bring a car in and go, "Man, this other shop totally screwed this up. Can you fix this?" I'm sure we can do a better job than what they did. And it just kind of, that whole concept of paying people to screw stuff up for me just escalated to me doing as much as I possibly could. The only thing we didn't do on the Merc was the upholstery and the transmission. And, obviously chrome, didn't do chrome in-house. And, there's 2 little emblems on the side of the car that we farmed out. But yeah, I got sick of just having to deal with mediocre work for a fair price,
Yeah, because that's the side of the business nobody talks about, where you think everything's going to be roses and a car is going to be dropped off to you and you're just going to get it from day one. But so many of these cars get passed from shop to shop. I mean, like any car today is almost like the village bicycle. You know, everybody's had a ride on it, and that's a tough gig.
Yeah, it is. It's obnoxious because the next guy is always going to be mad at what the guy previously did, and. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's your job to fix that problem at your own cost, of course. You know, I like that expectation. That's the best.
Yeah,
I used to hate that in the design world, where it was, I got screwed by this guy. He took my money and ran away. Will you do it for X dollars less because I already paid that money?
Yeah. No. No.
So, man, I'm going to segue into the art just because we're right here and we're already talking about paint. So, when did you figure out that you enjoyed art? I mean, it's another stupid question when you think about it. So, as a human being, when did you decide that you liked something that stirs the soul, and,
right?
Ignites the mind?
Well, if I remember correctly, it was a Tuesday. The birds were singing especially loud that day.
Oh, awesome! I remember that Tuesday.
I was there. That's where all the birds went.
It was another one of those things that just kind of grew slowly. I always sketched in class and did little basic things, but I was never that kid that would be the noteworthy artist in school.
Me neither.
But the art teacher knew that I had talent, but the stuff was just kind of rough. So, never really chased it. I just assumed everybody could just draw to a minimum state anyways. Again, my normal must be everybody else's normal. And I really didn't pick up any kind of art tools to deliberately do art until 7 years ago. I kind of had a crisis in my life where I just had it in the shop. At that point, I'd been doing, because I've had BioCustoms since 97, coming up on 21 years now. So after doing that for 15 something years or whatever, I was sick of working on cars. Our entire life revolved around cars. All the big die-cast cars around that time and stuff. We had all of that crap. And I got sick of going from car-themed thing to car-themed thing to car-themed thing. So, if I remember correctly, my ex-wife and her daughter were doing just a lot of hobby stuff. And my ex-wife's cousin was a really talented abstract artist. And so we started doing more stuff with them and going to like the LA Brewery. I don't know if you've ever been to the artist colony that's there at the old brewery.
No.
That's where he was literally next door neighbors with Coop.
Oh,
like the hot rod artist Coop.
That would be awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. So Coop's studio is pretty trippy. A lot of fun, but nothing what you see in public. He's got a lot different stuff that he does in his studio. But the whole brewery was a trip. It was a huge brewery. I don't know exactly how they had so many offices, but all the offices were separated into studio apartments. And in order to rent there, you had to be an artist that lived off of your art at least part-time. So twice a year during the spring and during the fall, they would have an open house to where the entire brewery was open to the public. And you could either choose to leave your studio open or closed. And a lot of people lived in these studios. They're studio apartments. And so they'd be like folding up their beds up into the corner and just putting sheets over them or boxes so that you couldn't see what was going on. But there's a handful of artists that I've seen in magazines and out, a little bit more publicly that were all in that area. And that's probably what triggered my interest in more of the quote unquote around fine art, because of course fine art and lowbrow are two different worlds. So probably liked the lowbrow a little bit more in the beginning and enjoying a little bit more of the fine art, but without the politics that go with fine art.
Yeah, that's a whole different world. I mean, I think you and I, when we really started to talk about art, was right about the time like magazines like High Fructose and things like that were really starting to hit the stands.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, because that's that lowbrow world, and I hate that term now.
It's a bad term, but yeah.
That's like indie bands, I don't like that. that's
just like the term rat rod.
Yeah, exactly.
It just conjures up the wrong, image.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. Agreed. So what inspires you to create the art that you do? Because I'm trying to think of one of the first pieces that I saw of yours was going back to a particular vampire piece.
I
still love that painting.
The organic bloodsucker with the green sucker. Yeah. In the beginning, I really liked just juxtaposing elements. Was a lot of fun. And like the green sucker instead of sucking on blood, or the elephant hand, elephantitis of the hand or whatever. I just enjoyed the juxtaposing of elements, but was kind of afraid to let loose, I guess, is one of my weaknesses. The whole being a little avant-garde and pushing the envelope isn't really my style. And then after the divorce, I was able to just go, I kind of don't give a shit what anybody thinks anymore. And so I started doing more of the nude art that I'm doing today, which is my main thing, just because I like pushing the envelope and making people a little bit uncomfortable with something that's not technically, that shouldn't be uncomfortable. It's just a nude body. So anybody that's uncomfortable by it, that's a you problem. And anybody that enjoys it, right on.
Nicely said.
That's the key, is finding that weird thing that makes you uncomfortable. Like, if you go back, this could be stop me if this is dumb, but I always looked at things like in your art, you got a couple pieces that just give you that weird feeling. You're kind of like, you're just slightly off kilter. And for me, I equate that to watching the opening scene of Jaws when I was a kid. And there's a whole weird thing to that movie where it's not scary because there's somebody being attacked by the shark because it's bloody or anything like that. It's that unease of just the way that whole thing is set up. It's something horrible happening to someone and you're witnessing it and you can't stop it. Mm-hmm. There's that strange feeling. And your art, there's a couple pieces of yours that take your brain and drag you into a spot where you're like, I'm going to stand here and just kind of hang out. And your art's grabbing and going, no, let's go in here and take a look at this. And you're going, no, I don't want to. And that is the best thing. It's a thrill ride, and that's a really cool deal. And
awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. And not a lot of artists are capable of doing that. And I remember going through, like, I was classically trained, which, if you're listening to this, there's good sides and bad sides to that. The bad side was if you're sitting in a class, and we talked about this off air too. We were talking about, a certain talk that somebody gave where they said, if you don't like this artist, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you can really easily become indoctrinated in that. And that's a horrible thing, especially something as freeing as art, where somebody can indoctrinate you. I had that done to me where I look at certain art and you become kind of an elitist. You think, okay, well, this guy is technically proficient here and his work is perfectly balanced over here. And you could easily do that with anything. You could do that in the car side of things. Like, for instance, you could have done that. Let's go back to Jerry's Merc as an example. That car could have easily been sitting down on the ground with cruiser skirts on it, wide white walls, and Appleton spots.
There's a lot of people who wish I did.
Oh, and good for them, because there's 500 million other of them out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like, with your art, I think your art definitely is an extension of your personality. And I'm glad that you're finding that freedom to just go, screw this, you're doing what makes sense to you and what feels right. And now we just got all touchy-feely and new agey. So tell me, how does the color blue make you feel, Max?
Blue? Sad.
I didn't realize that you weren't classically trained. I just the quality of your art, the perspective. I just had always assumed that you'd done years in art school.
Oh, well, thank you. But I just one day decided to pick up a brush or a pencil or whatever that day decided the tool was. Thank you, though.
And it's amazing. As someone who has to make a living drawing things, I said when I'd first look at your stuff, I was like, dude, the guy, you just get it.
Right.
And, you know, that's one of those things. Natural talent is it's very rare to find.
No, thank you. Yeah, I get, on this same subject, talking about my art, I've had a handful of people, of course, ask me if I'll draw their car or something, and it's always no. I'll work on your car in the shop, but when I come in the house and do art, if it's not, what I'm interested in, I don't want, it's naked women for a reason, because it's not cars. My house doesn't look like it belongs to a car person. My house looks like you'd actually be surprised at my house, because it's pretty well put together for a bachelor. Most of my house is all mid-century stuff, but it's not at all. There's not an inkling in the house that makes you think that it's car, except for right now I do have the subframe from a motorcycle that needs to be shipped out, but that's it.
But it's temporary.
Yeah, it is. But even like two of my favorite people, Brian and Chris Dunlop, I would love to want to put your art in my house, but as much as I love you guys, I don't want your art in my house.
Well, you're going to love my next series, because I finally come to grips with just drawing penises into everything, and I'm going to eliminate the everything else. It's going to be strictly that. So if you're interested in that.
Are you going to have a lunchbox Diggs treasure chest, though?
He's seeking applications for models, I hear.
Hey. Okay, that took an ugly turn.
It's just like Where's Waldo? You just got to find his little symbol.
Ain't that the truth? So, man, and speaking of your art, it's not for you. It's not just drawing and painting either. You've done some really cool stuff over the years. Back when I was a married soul, you had done a pair of wedding bands for me.
Yeah.
And that made my life. I mean, those were very cool. And I kept mine, damn it. So switching gears here and getting back to cars, how do you find a balance between offering advice like you do online and self-promoting, obviously, your own work and your own product?
Well, I always feel like a snake oil salesman when people ask me, like, hey, how do I get rid of this problem? Drop spindles? And they're like, nobody makes drop spindles. We do.
I know a guy.
Yeah, like I'm telling you the real fix for your problem is to put drop spindles on it, but I'm the only guy that makes drop spindles. I'm sure there's a couple other places out there now that are offering them, obviously, but it was the real fix for these trucks.
Right.
It was like a weird switch between the 88 and 98 full-size Chevy trucks and then the next generation body style. The 88 to 98 generation, you could lower them really, really well, but they lifted like crap.
Right.
And now the new generation stuff all get lifted really well and they lower like crap. So,
exactly.
When you get a vehicle like a Titan or a Frontier or something that's not popular enough for somebody to, go to China and have cast spindles made, if you're not going to sell 10,000 of them, why do it? So, it's just the correct fix, but I happen to be one of the only guys that make them. So it's that's why I do them, but it is, I do feel like a snake oil salesman as well.
So just, and this is probably, the information is probably on the website, but what do your spindles go for?
Oh, that's what's funny is because it says in the top corner, $750 is a cost for a mod because we modify the factory spindle. So, it's just like for the cost of the modification is $750. And I get emails all the time asking me how much it is, even though it's like right on the page. So, but the one-off spindles, of course, double that right away and keep going up from there, depending on how crazy they are, because one-off stuff takes a hell of a lot more time. And,
for sure.
So at that stage, it just becomes an hourly job and how intensely do you want them finished? Because, we can do just simple TIG welded part and you can send them out and powder coat them, or we can hand file everything and make it this jewelry piece that you just want to hang on your, nightstand or whatever you want to put a spindle in your house. It just depends on what everybody wants. So it's hard to put a dollar figure there, but
right.
What's the average drop you're getting out of a spindle?
Too much more than 3 inches starts to get into other issues where parts just run into parts.
Well, yeah, you're going to have stuff hitting the wheels, brake calipers getting all over the place, and it's going to start
linkage.
Start hitting the A-arms, and you go, okay, stuff's hitting, but
So the biggest drop spindle I've ever done is a 4-inch, and that's a full fabricated one for the for the Titan.
Wow.
So it uses, but it's only for the guys that are going body dropped on like 28s. So I won't even sell it to you if you've got a wheel smaller than a 26-inch wheel, because it's only for the guys that need a lot of lift. So I run horizontally mounted uniballs so that the uniball actually limits the steering, but not the lift. So these guys, they can lay all the way out and get like 12 inches of lift.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it obviously helps. Again, drivability being a huge thing, if we can get it all the way up and still function. But you got to build, it's set up for custom arms. It's not a factory bolt-on part where all the rest of the stuff I do is bolts on.
I remember years ago, a friend of mine, Troy Hamilton, that I know you know, did what was the Ford Ranger 4-door pickup, Sport Track.
Yeah.
I remember that, I don't know if you helped him or if
he built that he did that at the shop. We built, he just used my fixture and built those for himself.
Yeah, I remember he was telling me that he hand built at least modified the factory spindle. How the hell, how do you dare modify a factory spindle? He's like, Max Fish knows how to do all this stuff. I'm like, what? Anyway, so I've known Troy for, before either one of us had kids. That was 25 years ago. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Obviously, I've known Troy's a pretty close friend of mine as well. So, I've known him for quite a while. It's one of those things where I used to get asked all the time how to weld cast, but it's not. It's like asking somebody. I tell them all the time that it's like asking somebody how to build a bomb in your basement. It's just not a good idea to tell the world how to build a bomb. So, I just don't, and I've gotten chewed out a few times for not sharing the information, but it's one of those things. I don't share engineering information either, because unless you know how to engineer, for me to tell you how thick the material should be to build the part, I'm putting myself into a state of liability, because you're going to, I'll build a part out of 1/8-inch plate that I wouldn't safely ask somebody else to do out of 1/4-inch plate.
Sure.
Because they just don't know enough about engineering. So it's kind of in that same thing. Because I've had a couple of our spindles fail just from simply overheating the part while welding it. It crystallized the cast and just turns it literally rock hard and just breaks straight off.
Yeah.
So I don't want to share that kind of information with folks.
Well, I know Troy put a lot of miles on that Sport Track and sold it, and somebody else put a lot of miles on it. So yeah. That was a cool little truck.
It was really cool. Troy's got a great eye for style as well.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, everything he builds is pretty.
You mentioned a really good point. Having something fail because you've overheated it. Obviously, another point to not just having the engineering background, you've got to understand metallurgy. And there's a lot of sciences coming together for something, and I hate to say it because it is a complex thing, but for something as simple as suspension. Yeah. It gets mind-bogglingly complex.
Oh yeah, really fast. So it's hard to put it all, like the books. For the books I'm doing, there's going to be at least 3 books because I can't fit it all into one book. Maybe when they're all done, I can have a giant Bible to put together. But man, it's going to end up being probably 150 pages on just rear suspension, and that's just straight axle. That's not even getting into IRS stuff. So the next book will be A-arm suspensions. And probably half of it will literally be trying to quantify all the weird steering stuff I was talking about, if you're going to design from scratch. Because not very many people are designing suspensions from scratch. They might be basing it off of pre-existing parts and modifying, or pre-existing systems and modifying it. But people building from scratch, it's, how much steering wheel input should move the tires themselves, how many degrees. All of that stuff needs to be taken into consideration, and we don't have to worry about that in any other case,
Right.
So how do you quantify steering arm length, not tie rod, but actual distance from the bottom ball joint to just from the steering axis to where the tie rod mounts? How far out should that line be on the spindle? How far is the rack or steering box swinging. How do you integrate all that into Ackerman and bump steer and too long of a tie rod, too short of a tie rod? Caster gain is going to change all of that stuff. There's so much weirdness that goes into just steering when you're designing from scratch that it's going to end up being multiple chapters. It'll probably end up having to be like 3 chapters, one for each dimension, top view, front view, side view. They all affect the steering in their own individual way. So it'll probably end up being something like that.
It's interesting on the custom, the so-called custom front ends. The Volare was so big for years, and then Nova Camaros, and then of course Mustang 2s. Yeah. And everybody wants to argue that it's the greatest thing ever. And it's like, have you actually ever driven a Mustang 2 and said, holy shit, I want every car I have to handle like this or not handle like this? And everybody's been so sold on the Mustang 2 for the last 20-something years. That's like, I've driven a Mustang 2 or a Pinto, same thing.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't want something that drives like that.
No, not at all.
No. Well, I think it comes down to it being just it is probably the most generic setup. I mean, period. And
it's compact.
It's used under so many different things. So that's like looking at anything like GM A body or F body stuff that was super popular. I mean, it's a good generic setup.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I certainly can't argue. There's a reason that's as prolific as it is. It's pretty universal, but what I don't understand is how these dudes with $250,000 cars going down the laundry list of mods, and they're like, yeah, and we got a Pinto front end, and it's just, I'm lost. But one of the guys that helped me really understand street suspension stuff, his name is Steve Duck. He's an ex Bilstein engineer, if I remember correctly, and I was talking to him. And he knows the guy that designed the Mustang 2 front end, and the guy has no clue why everybody thinks it's this amazing go-to suspension. It's a cheap suspension designed for a cheap car.
I was hoping you were going to take that a different way, and we were going to hear, he knows the guy who designed that suspension. And the guy's a lunatic. He's a raving madman. He lives in a shed somewhere, and he eats Korean countertops. That'd be awesome, but...
Well, I mean, to be fair, he could. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, that's a hell of a point, though. Yeah, why would you take a car that rides poorly and just deem that as being the thing? Well, probably because there's so many of them out there. And track width wise, they're really adaptable.
Yeah.
They're not hard to set up. So that bolt-in thing makes sense.
They do have their strengths, sure.
Oh, yeah. Like today, everything's, later Corvette stuff. That's the big way to go. Everything's based on that.
Well, and that's problematic for airbags.
I was going to say, because that's a whole different can of worms you're getting into.
Yeah, they've got a lot of what I call induced geometry, to where the caster and camber and deliberate toe change and stuff like that as they run through their travel, because it's a performance car. You can push the geometry really, really hard on a static car so that it kicks ass in a corner. But if you were to just simply lower the car 3 inches and drive it like that, and then raise it 3 inches and drive it like that, it's going to be a shit show of a car to drive. It's probably okay, but something that's a hell of a lot more mundane and not meant to be a performance car is going to have a lot less induced geometry. It's going to be a lot more muted. That's the thing about like my front steering geometry theory or even my rear suspension theory is still having geometry, but it's a lot more muted because it needs to work across a larger span of drivability than you would normally do from the factory. So it's just taking factory concepts that work, that have mathematical proof to them, and just kind of making them a little more generalized. And the Corvette is not that suspension, not the new generation stuff anyways. It's not good for bags.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot of that. I've looked at a lot. You'll see a car coming together where, they've got, we're not going to name names, but see if X company's chassis, they're running, the Corvette style suspension. The minute you see it with bags, especially when you see a build photo, in my brain, I'm not looking at it like, oh, it's really cool. They've got polished arms and this and that. I'm looking at it going, oh, that's not going to ride right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of people don't think that way. And that's why, it's not a plug for your book. We're not getting paid for this. And I sure hope you get paid for this. But, a book like yours is desperately needed out there. I still think there are guys out there who can build the hell out of a car, but can't put a good suspension together.
Yeah. I agree.
I really hope that this inspires. I hope this inspires the hell out of the kid who's putting together something in his parents' garage.
Yeah, agreed. I hope so too. That's what I want. Obviously, I don't. My shop's always busy, so I don't need to drum up any more business in my place. We stay fine. So I want to see the rest of the industry do well and start refining because obviously bags aren't going anywhere. They've been well in place for a couple decades now. They're not going anywhere. So let's figure out how to make these not just be a compromise thing where you go, ride's pretty good for bags. What if it rode pretty kick-ass for a car, not just for bags? So I think it's totally doable, and the information just needs to be presented to the public. And I hope like hell that it changes the way everybody looks at it. Even if I don't get credit, I just want to see the industry change for a better in that sense.
Awesome. That's why I like you as a human being. The greater good. Look at you.
Yeah. Well, if I got credit for it, then I'd have to be in like all these weird places and doing talks and stuff where I'd kind of just rather stay at home with my cats.
I would give anything to see a Max Fish TED Talk. Let me ask you this. Okay, here you go. If the opportunity presented itself, if you were told and I know they wouldn't do this to you, but let's just say Friday you have to give a TED Talk. What would you give it on? What drives you to a point? What are you passionate enough about to stand up there and give the big Max Fish TED Talk on blank?
Well, the unfortunate part is the thing that actually drives me day to day has nothing to do with cars, but that's the one area where I have probably a corner on the market is suspension design and proper approach to that sort of thing. So I'd be one of the few people that should be called in to do that sort of a talk, but I'd rather give like you and I, we've had a handful of those talks, and I got a few friends that I connect with in the same way of just learning how to be a genuinely happy human being and owning who you are and being like unapologetically you and all the things that go with, like, to me, that next level bit of life, the Jonathan Livingston Seagull thing of learning how to, be awesome because the rest of the world doesn't matter. And this is what you've chosen to be good at. I think that's more important than any of the automotive or art stuff that I do. So I'd have to be picking something somehow in there that wasn't already covered in a TED Talk, because I'm sure somebody like what's her name? She's awesome. Brene Brown.
Oh, Brene Brown, right?
Yeah, she's done some great talks on that sort of thing. So I'd be like the Johnny Come Lately compared to her.
In talking to you, I got to tell you, through my life, you really opened my eyes to that whole thing that, like, when people are seeking out the meaning of life, what's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is just being happy with your own shit show.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
The trick isn't seeking out this magic pill, man. It's putting on the hip waders, getting through the bullshit that you create that you believe, and sifting through it to figure out, okay, what's real and what's not.
Yeah. Or whatever that means to you. It's uniquely yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a fun deal. And that's that whole, that takes a lot of intestinal fortitude, I think, to kind of dig into yourself.
Yeah, it does. It can be scary in there for sure.
And I think that's worse than the opening minutes of Jaws.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's always, anytime I have that talk, I sit down and I always have that kind of first talk with any of the new people that I meet or whatever. And it's almost always met with some sort of pushback. I'm always told why they deserve the crappy situation they're in or something along those lines. And I just don't understand that. Why does that have to be in place? Why do you have to just fundamentally assume that you deserve whatever you got? Because it plagues some of my friends that I talk to all the time. It just plagues them endlessly. They just will not believe that they do deserve good things because they've got an excuse why they deserve the bad things.
Well, you got to be able to put that out there too. I think if you put something out in the universe and we've proven this time and time again between us, where if you just put it out in the universe that, hey, something good's going to happen. I mean, how many times have you and I talked about that when it's been like a pit of bleakness? You know, it's like, oh, everything's shit. Oh, wow. Are we out of shits now at this point on the show?
If we weren't, you just ruined it with that last one.
I think it depleted the pipe. But, you know, you get into it and, you know, if you just put out in the universe that, yeah, good stuff can happen, you've got to look for it.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it is with anything. And I think it works that way. How life itself, it works that way with cars. I mean, you can walk around a car show and just be like, oh, I hate that car. That's stupid. That's the wrong color. That sits wrong. Well, you're not going to see the one car that's out there that just blows your mind because this guy literally nailed, you know, two things together that had never been nailed together before on a car.
Mm-hmm.
Although if you're building your car with nails, well, unless it's a Woody, we have to have a little chit chat. That'd be a whole other book for you.
20s and 30s Fords.
Book 4, Why Not to Build with Nails.
You know, we could. Oh, this could be a crossover show. We could have you and Bob from ARP on, and we could do a crossover show.
And I'll be the nail guy, and he can be the fastener guy. No, the thread pitch.
This will be awesome. We'll call this point. No, we can't call it. Yeah, well, it could be a point counterpoint show. Who cares?
I want to see grade 8 nails, man. I'm kind of excited about this.
Right?
Left-hand thread, though.
Left-hand thread, grade 8 nails. You know what? Talking about the TED Talk, I think one of the first things that popped into my mind, but I don't know if it'd be a 20-minute long talk, but I think the concept of the Dunning-Kruger effect is kind of a funny one because the internet as a whole. Does anybody else know the theory behind the Dunning-Kruger effect?
I do.
I do not know.
I've heard of it. I just don't remember what it is.
The general idea on the internet is people are too stupid to realize they're stupid, and that's
I'll agree with that.
That is the most overly simplified definition of it. When you really read the study, is really well done, and I think that would be a lot of fun to define the Dunning-Kruger effect a little bit more thoroughly, rather than the memes that just talk about dead people don't realize they're dead, just like stupid people don't realize they're stupid. There's a lot more to it, because the Dunning-Kruger effect also works in the opposite, where if you're very, very proficient at something, you're going to be frustrated with people who don't get it so quickly.
Yeah.
Is also part of the Dunning-Kruger effect, because you have these high expectations because it's easy for you, versus somebody who's, one of the studies they did was took low IQ people and asked them how well they thought or how good of a chess player they were. And they generally assumed that they were above average chess players, when we know that low IQ is generally going to produce low quality chess players. But that's kind of where the theory came from, is if you don't know enough about the subject, that also means you don't know enough to know that you can't process how much you don't know. It's you miss out on all of it. It's like the concept of Zorro, the movie Zorro with Antonio Banderas and Anthony Hopkins, and he says, "Do you even know how to use a sword?" And he's like, "Sure. The pointy end goes in the other guy." Yes. That doesn't mean that you're a sword master. That just means you know the basic concept. And I love that whole thing. I love that idea because it means that we're all idiots somehow. And I love that humbling effect of something, somehow, whatever the subject is, you pick it. Somebody's going to be a specialist and you're going to be an idiot. And I think that's so cool.
Is this why everybody thinks that they're a good driver?
Yes. No, seriously. Yeah, it's absolutely
right.
It.
Yeah. It all makes sense now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a really neat story. I mention it in the book as well, because the Dunning-Kruger effect, there's a lot of psychological stuff that keeps people from wanting to learn. Two-link guys are, they fall.
Oh, wow.
I read it on the interweb, so,
So yeah. I got a question. Are these Dunning-Kruger guys, are they like famous scientists, or are they a couple of frat guys that were drinking beer going, man, people are stupid?
If I remember correctly, they were actually that was their master thesis. Brian might correct me on that, but I think that's
correct.
Yeah. So they weren't even doctors at the time when they came up with it, but I don't know that anybody's proved it wrong. I haven't seen anybody that popped up and said, no, anti-DKers.
That should be a whole thing. There's a group out there.
Anti-DKers, anti-Dunning-Krugers.
Great. Yeah,
if we can be a flat earthers, there's got to be somebody that's against any other concept.
Let's not even get into that.
No, please. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, flat earth. So here we go. Now,
I want to see the Max Fish anti-flat earth book.
The anti-flat earth book.
It's a page and a half long.
Did you guys see that? Did you guys see the little screen cap from a post or a comment I made on an account where I told somebody that I would happily engage them because I was curious what they thought, and they just straight up called me an idiot and cussed at me and all kinds of stuff.
Well, I live for that. Brilliant. You've got somebody when you can turn it to anger within 4 sentences.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I was totally open. Like, yeah, dude, let's interact. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Nope, you're an idiot. I don't want to hear you spew bullshit out of your mouth. There's all kinds of stuff. It was pretty good.
That's somebody's ex.
Yeah.
There's got to be a lot of, that we won't even get into it. I mean, I was just thinking there's got to be a lot of drugs involved with getting to the point of flat Earth.
I think it's just a general disenfranchised with the information we're fed, because we're getting bad information from all directions, whether it's, generally accepted, however, whatever way you want to believe it, we're getting so much weird information that doesn't really compute in our brains that it's so easy to get to a point to where you start to reject everything. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me is you just disenfranchised with life in general at that stage.
I think the questioning anything is a sign of some form of intellect.
Absolutely.
But I do have to agree that there's a certain line where you cross over from just intellect into just blatant stupidity.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. And I think that's a really easy, and I think it's such a thin line, it's easy to blur sometimes too. So, it's easy to just kind of nudge across it, and it's like, well, this guy seems kind of smart. It's like George Carlin once said, you could be listening to somebody like, well, this guy seems fairly intelligent. He's an idiot.
There it is. Yep. I've got so many conspiracy theories that are just in my brain of things that I'm just aware of. They're just kind of like peripherally understand what's going on, but I don't ever subscribe to any of them as absolutes. So I just remain skeptical, and that's what I tell my friends when they start questioning me on things. And the Second Amendment is a good example of a discussion where I just go, man, I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but I can tell you that I want to defend myself. So how do we meet in the middle? How do we find this middle ground? And I'm happy to have these open conversations and not take this staunch stance that no, you're an idiot if you feel any one way or the other. You're allowed to feel however you want to feel, but let's talk about it. What would make you comfortable? This is the problem that I have with that and implementing these ideas. Like, let's just the world is just missing open communication anymore. It's so weird. I'm lost on this one.
Just need to be right and then have to be vocal and get rude about it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just right asinine.
There. Okay, you hit on something good there, Eric. So, and this is going to go way off topic. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. Well, if you're still listening, people, this is going to get fun. If you stand back, and I'm going to tie all of this together, I think, really wonderfully. And if I don't, just call me an idiot, because maybe I've crossed over that blurry line. But if you can break anything down in our universe, the one we live in here is all geometrically based. See, that all goes back to suspension. And if you look at it, everything could be broken down to geometry. It's really that simple. There was a guy at the University of Chicago, back in the 70s, Jack Cowan. And Jack Cowan came up with this idea that you could take a hallucinatory response in somebody and break it down mathematically. And what he kind of showed was that, like the way your visual cortex is wired, there are only certain kinds of patterns that can happen in any person who's having a visual hallucination. Now, if you start figuring out that no matter what happens, everything has to happen a certain way. So if you start looking, breaking down things in an electron microscope, this becomes an atom. An atom breaks down to these core parts. These core parts break down to this. This breaks down to what we figure out vibrations and energy somewhere. Everything has to be a certain way. What happens, though, is everything gets layered with this whole thing of like perception. And then you add pride to that. So then you get somebody who's going to say, well, I think the Earth is flat. And you're like, well, no, here's why the Earth isn't flat. Well, you're an idiot. No matter what you say. Well, like my favorite thing on flat Earth is have you ever seen this video where the guy has a globe and he's got this model airplane?
Oh, Jesus, this guy.
Live for this video. Well, the nose would be pointing down.
People that know me know that I'm not an idiot. Remember, he had that descriptor in the beginning, just so we know. He said,
yeah, it really. So the people who know you are afraid to tell you that you're an idiot.
Yeah,
is basically what you're saying at that point. At any point in time, you could stop and whittle away what's left of that model airplane and stab somebody in the face.
What's funny is on the tooling thing, and I really would way rather get back to the talking about humans and stuff. But I did get the chance to meet. Was it Ken, the NASCAR suspension designer, Ray Evernham?
Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got to meet Ray Evernham when they were doing the Merc on the Americana show. And, he got to talking to me when he realized that I had designed the suspension and stuff. And he's like, oh, wait, what? Suspension guy? Come on, man. So we all hung out afterwards and chat. And so I asked him about the truck trailing arm 2-link that's underneath the NASCAR. Because, of course, everybody defends the 2-link by saying, but mine's this type. So I asked him about it, and he goes, oh, man, yeah, no, it's a terrible design. I wish we had something different. It just is what it is because we're trying to keep it grassroots and simple. So we're not trying to overcomplicate it with 4 links and tunable suspensions. So he's like, yeah, it's on the street. If I had any other option, I'd be doing something besides this. And that's how we end up with an airplane that's upside down. You know what I want to know is people that are doing this whole, how do you keep water on a globe? Because I've seen dudes that are pouring water over an orange and all this dumb shit that makes no sense. If you were to lock somebody in a box that had no windows, no doors, like all the walls were white, and you just like screwed the walls in behind them, to where they couldn't tell what up or down was, you know what down would be? The direction gravity is pulling.
Yep.
That's it. Otherwise, there's nothing else that gets down. I don't understand how they think that you get to the underside of the Earth. Doesn't like you're going to fall off because gravity. I know they don't believe gravity exists, so you can't bring gravity into the flat Earth conversation. But that's what down means, is the gravity direction.
My favorite theory on that is that the Earth is like a giant plate. And that it's just constantly in a state of being thrust upward through space. And that's how gravity works.
Perpetual motion Earth?
Yes, because space is infinite, so Earth can constantly be going upward. Yeah.
Okay.
I remember seeing that and going, really? That's what you've come up with.
Then we decided we weren't going to talk about flat Earth, and then we could stop talking about flat Earth for 10 minutes.
How did this happen?
Son of a
or 2 links.
We almost drifted into like with your box thing. We drifted into like Plato's like allegory of the cave. This one all deep, man.
I'm feeling the Dunning-Kruger effect quite deeply, personally.
Oh,
well, at least you're not feeling the Freddy Krueger effect. That's pretty horrible.
As long as we don't get combative.
Nah, it's not
Call them names.
So, in conclusion, the end.
Yay!
No, I want to have you back at some point, and I want to do a whole sub series of this where we literally just discuss philosophy. So, for anyone interested, as far as the book goes, online, obviously I know you've got a good Facebook group going for this. Would you like to tell our listeners where they can find that?
The Facebook specifically is probably the best place to keep track of what's going on with the book, even though I've been really bad about updating it. It's just Air Suspension Design Book. As I'm putting all of the content, a lot of the content that's going on the account, like the videos and stuff that are going on my YouTube, I share a little clip on the Facebook that then all has a link to the YouTube account. And in the book itself, we'll actually have QR codes to where when you're reading through the book, and if you get a specific subject that has a video associated with it, you can just scan that on your phone and actually go directly to the YouTube. So, but the Facebook account probably has the most information, and there's an Instagram account as well that's more for the publishing company as a blanket, because there is a kids book that we're kind of working on as well, very slowly, but we want to actually bring a real kids, an automotive-based kids book to the world that's to introduce kids to the different styles that isn't necessarily specific to, hot rods or whatever thing it needs to be, but just in general, all the different genres of custom cars. So it's a slow going thing, but because of that, we actually started a publishing company called Pedantic Publishing, because I'm pedantic. And so that's what that is. And so everything will kind of fall underneath that umbrella. And I've got ideas for other books as well down the road. Once that time comes, then I can worry about starting an actual Pedantic Publishing Facebook page. But, yeah, I would say that would be the easiest place, would be the book account. And then, my personal account, everybody's is welcome to follow me. I always post weird stuff on there, just Max Fish. Follow along. Everything's public. Anything I post is public. So don't be sad if I can't follow you back, or if I can't friend you back, but I'm happy to have everybody involved in the community and the conversation, as long as you're being polite. You can be as disagreeing as possible, as long as you're polite.
And you do have some great conversations on there. So that's, hell yes, join us. Mm-hmm. Join the gang. It's fun. I don't say gang. I just made you into a gang.
Now we're a bunch of animals.
Gotta have a rumble.
Well, you have to say we're not a gang. Well, you're a club, right?
So is that how we keep from being profiled?
Yes. See, we're a club. Well, awesome, man. I can't say thank you enough for your time and for the wonderful picture of the pillows. That made my day.
Yeah, I've still got
you've shared.
Got all the bedazzled ones saved for you. Yeah, it was awesome. I'm glad we finally got to connect. I know we've been talking about this for months and doing life things. It's finally ended up where I'm finally here. And it took a lot of work to borrow someone else's internet and mouse in order to make this work.
And it was awesome. And thank you. And I'm thankful that you had friends that would allow you those free-flowing electrons to do the thing with us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many subjects you and I talked about earlier that we didn't even get to touch on. We do need to do another one.
We need to, because you are a very fascinating human being. I truly enjoy your presence.
Thank you.
So, cool. I guess, hell, man, we're going to pick this back up. Now, I usually ask this question. Are you going to be at the SEMA show this year? I think we've talked about that.
I most likely only if Firestone Industrial, I communicate directly with those guys, and they came out and asked me if they shape their booth a specific way, if I would be a guest in their booth. To where
I had nothing to do with the design of that booth. So if you're thinking it's that shape, no.
No. They wanted me to just be a presence to be able to answer people's questions. So if that happens, most likely yes. If not, I probably won't go, because I'll probably rather work on the book, trying to get it finished up if it's not done by that time. So yeah, I don't know if I'll be at SEMA or not, but are you hoping for another hug and a high five?
Well, I was always hoping for that, because, we did the whole badge buddy thing that year. Yeah. That was awesome, and it always holds a place in my heart. And if you do make it out there, I'm going to invite you along to play a very special game. It became a thing last year where we play a nice game of Go Fish using those escort cards that they hand out on the street.
Oh, yeah.
And it'd be fun to have you along. You know, it's a good evening of
Maybe I'll make it out for one night then.
Oh, heck yeah!
There you go. The invitation is open. We will do
for an erotic Go Fish.
We will play escort card Go Fish, which sounds really great if you say it like that. With a French accent, that'd be awesome.
What would we call it? Go Trash?
Oh, Go Trash, yes.
Yeah.
Were you there that one year when they had a box van, but they got the box off the back and just had a really narrow glass window, and they had strippers dancing in the box van while they were driving by the show?
Well, they used to drive those up and down the Las Vegas Strip.
Really?
And there were so many accidents from other cars around that they actually ended up passing a law against them.
Oh wow!
I think that lasted about 6 months.
Wonder how that law reads.
I just wonder if it's one of those laws that's named for the person that got injured in one of the wrecks, where it's like Jimbo's Law.
The Stupski Law?
Crystal's Law.
Oh, sorry.
Ah, come on. Really? My people have suffered enough.
You started off with a Neil deGrasse Tyson joke. I need to finish off with a Stupski joke.
Fair enough, man. Just balancing the universe once more. That's great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again, sir. I appreciate you being here, man.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have a wonderful evening.
You too, man. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, man.
All right, thanks.
Bye. All right, well, thanks to our friend and our guest, Max Fish, for his time and insight this evening. And, as always, I'm Brian.
I'm still Brad.
I'm Alex.
I'm Eric.
And we'll catch you next time. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to keep up with us gearheads over on our website at www.round6pod.com. And if you'd like to, we invite you to follow along with us over on Facebook, Instagram, and be sure to check out all of our latest videos on youtube.com.